Good evening, and welcome to the third council debate. We honor our relationship with the Lakota people, the Weewakai, the Weewakam, and all of the Métis and Inuit that reside in the Campbell River area and the Lakota territory. We do have a couple of announcements tonight. Councillor candidate Claire Mogliv is unable to attend. She was still too unwell to even attend by Zoom. So she will be submitting answers in writing that we will post on our website and link it to all of our Facebook channels and our social media. And Councillor candidate Kerr is also been called away on a family emergency and extends his apologies for not being able to be here tonight. And again, we've made the offer to him to also submit his answers in writing, and we will post them as well. Before I do the introductions, I also have to extend an apology. During the first candidates debate, there was a comment made in jest regarding candidate Cornfield, and some did not receive it in that way. So to all of those who were offended by what they received as a disparaging comment regarding candidate Cornfield, we offer an unabridged apology. Tonight's candidates that are here on stage, we have candidate Blackburn at the far right, and then we have candidate Lanyon and candidate Moen. We'll begin with introductions. Good evening. And also, I'm Mary Ruth Snyder, the Executive Director of the Campbell River and District Chamber of Commerce, co-hosting this along with the Tidemark Theatre and the Campbell River Mirror, and we welcome everyone. So candidate Blackburn, if you could please start with your opening statement.
Yeah, thanks, Mary Ruth, and I do just want to extend good wishes to Claire and to Ron. I hope you're well, and we'll be thinking about you. My name's Ken Blackburn. We'll have a chance to discuss a range of issues tonight, but I just want to give a little bit of background about myself. From the age of 16 to 30, I actually worked in industry. I worked in road construction on paving crews and ran loaders, rollers, and backhoes. I worked in building construction in tile and cement for a number of years. I moved to the Yukon and worked in mining, worked in a copper mine, then moved to northern BC for a zinc mine, and then out to Baffin Island for a gold mine. I was a tireman for White Pass Transport in the Yukon for a couple of years, running the tire fleets for the ore trucks out of Faro and Keno Hill. I've been a Teamster union member, and I've been a United Steelworker union member. All of this time, I had 3 kids and was raising a young family. I say that because I went back to school and then got into international development for 10 years and taught in university, and then moved to Campbell River, where I've been for the last 16 years working at the museum and as the executive director of the Arts Council, and I have partnered with just about every nonprofit in the community. I say this because you may hear me refer many times to the importance of the relationship between the private sector, the industrial sector, and the not-for-profit sector, and I bring a vast wealth of experience to that.
That's the sound you'll hear when your time is up. And I will put my hand up with 10 seconds left. Candidate Lanyon.
Sure. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming. My name is Ben Lanyon. I've lived in Campbell River for 17 years. I've got 2 kids, both going to Carey High. My professional training is as a public accountant, a CPA. And I own a firm downtown in Campbell River where I get to see lots of stuff. I've never been a council member, and my viewing of the previous debates definitely made me aware that there's lots of areas that I'm not that fluent in. So I may forego some questions or give short answers or even go off tangent. So I ask for your forgiveness in advance. But I'm really happy to be here. I look forward to basically sharing with you my values and my objectives going forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Candidate Moen.
Tesla, Naguam Sumoan. I am an uninvited settler on the unceded traditional territories of the Likwata people, and I am committed to decolonizing myself, my thoughts, my actions, and to overturning systems of oppression. I live downtown with my partner, Reed, and our animal companions. I'm currently a manager in nonprofit shelter and housing, and I co-manage the farmers market. I sit on the coordinating committees for both the Coalition to End Homelessness and the Strathcona Community Food Hub. I'm a lifelong activist for social and environmental justice. I currently volunteer at the Hama-Aleas Community Kitchen, and I lead the cleanup crew with the Canada Day Committee. I have experience as a small business owner in education, arts, other things, agriculture, finance, and in nonprofit governance. We are living with interconnected crises: climate breakdown, the lack of homes, the toxic drug poisoning crisis, systemic failures in our healthcare system, unbalanced economic development, and growing inequality. These crises have to be connected to people, so the actions we take have positive impacts for everyone. Campbell River is full of caring, compassionate, and knowledgeable people, and City Hall should be the catalyst for utilizing that knowledge and passion to make the changes we need.
Thank you, Candidate Moen. We will begin the questions with Candidate Lanyon. How will reconciliation and decolonization inform your approach in working with our Indigenous communities?
Great question. So I myself am a Métis person. Although you can't tell, usually, people look at me and ask to see evidence of that. My understanding is that we need to have partnerships with First Nations. That's what they're looking for. To me, reconciliation means two things, and a bunch of other things too, but the two for sure are respect and compensation. What that looks like exactly, I don't know. But it's definitely something that's still in progress, and I absolutely look forward to working in partnerships with our local First Nations.
Okay, thank you. Candidate Moen.
I attempt to examine and decolonize my thinking every day. I do this by showing respect for learning cultural protocols, for examining what we value and why we value that, asking how I can contribute to anti-racism, and understanding joy, pain, suffering, healing in a culture in the context of ancestral, historical, and generational context. And I am seeking to unlearn pan-indigeneity. I would advocate for Indigenous-led education and training in cultural competency for city staff and for council, both in orientation and as professional development. We have incredible knowledge keepers here. We need to honor them, and reconciliation will not happen until settlers, we colonizers, do the work so that the First Nations will trust us.
Thank you. And Candidate Blackburn.
Well, Friday is the first National Day for Reconciliation. It's a holiday, and I think unlike the kind of boisterousness we had down in Spirit Square for Aboriginal Day, which is really a celebration of culture, I think Reconciliation Day is a time for each of us to reflect personally on what we can do and what we can contribute to fostering respect and partnerships with our First Nations neighbors. I have been working closely with First Nations knowledge keepers and cultural leaders my entire time here in Campbell River. Work very closely with a lot of the artists, the carvers and the singers and dancers. Reconciliation for me is constantly learning from them and understanding the depth of their culture and give Campbell River credit. The rejuvenation of culture and the strength of culture here is truly remarkable. We were on this stage on Sunday night with our residency program with artist Sean DeCare, who's working downtown with the homeless population, and just amazing work being done. At the city level, we have to recognize equality in their dealings with the federal government. I think we have to be a voice of listening and assistance where we're asked for it. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Moen, explain to us briefly your professional background and how you feel it contributes to you being a good candidate for councillor.
My professional now. Okay, I had prepared my value statement, but we'll get to that. I am a prolific reader and lifelong learner. I devour information about a lot of things and about a lot of information and a lot of different subjects. And I listen to experts, but I'm also willing to act when action is necessary with what we do know. My first career was in finance. It was very valuable in teaching me skills with time management, human resource management, and with finance, of course. But I didn't quite fit into that culture back then. And since leaving the corporate world, I have been predominantly involved with nonprofit. I have been a co-owner of a small business. We owned a sound company in Saskatchewan. And I have experience primarily in health, food security, and with housing in nonprofit, both as an employee, manager, and on the governance level. And I have served on a variety of boards, including national and international boards. I have been a few different things, because when you're a nonprofit, that happens. But I'm not afraid to take the beginner's seat. Between consulting gigs, I became a day laborer at an organic farm, and that is a good thing to do, and that's what I'll bring to City Council. I will be a learner.
Thank you. Candidate Blackburn.
Well, actually, if I had known that question was coming up, I would have probably changed my opening statement. Because, again, I can't stress enough the experience in two worlds that I feel are critically important for community dynamics, and that is the private industrial world or the business world and the not-for-profit world. Raising a young family in industry and all of the jobs that I mentioned, I truly appreciate the important role of industry in economic development in communities and the important role of industry in my life. And I'm sure there's many young families in forestry and aquaculture and mining in this community, construction as well, that I can relate to, and the struggles, the difficulties, but the joys that comes with working in industry. And then on the other side, spending 10 years in international development and working in some very difficult situations of orphanages in Egypt or seniors' homes in Ukraine, tuberculosis hospital in Russia, being on the front lines of very difficult poverty issues made me understand the connections that are needed to address complex challenges. Working in Campbell River in the not-for-profit sector and with people in health, education, social services, I've come to understand how you set up partnerships and connection to affect change, and I think that networking is a key quality for councillors.
Thank you. Candidate Lanyon.
Yes, thank you. So my training is as a CPA, so that my day typically consists of like detailed file work on numbers, and then a lot of meetings. And I know a lot of the council duties are related to just meetings, going through process, and understanding numbers. So I feel like in the nuts and bolts of accounting business, I've got a good background for that. I also have a background in some other businesses as well, and in terms of like human resources and managing employees and building a good work environment, I have a passion for that. And I know that's something that our city needs right now is good management capabilities in terms of oversight from council, and just coming up with ideas of how we can improve morale at City Hall. So there's other things I could say, but that's the main thing. Thank you.
Thank you. And now to the next question, candidate Blackburn. If you are elected, what will be your top 3 priorities and which one would you focus on first?
Thank you. I feel that the absolute top priority is creating a very strong respect and trust working relationship with staff in City Hall. For anybody that has their ear to the ground in the community and working across a number of sectors, the relationship has gone rather toxic. And it has led a lot of very good professionals to not want to continue in Campbell River, which is kind of unbelievable because the world wants to come here. This is an incredible community. But I don't feel the past council has done a good job at all with the relationship with staff. And staff are your key strength in a community. So that's my number 1 priority. Number 2 is to convene roundtables with all of my networks in social services, but also with downtown businesses to come up with steps moving forward with our downtown challenges and an action plan. And I feel that this will really start at a micro level, and we start looking at small incremental changes that are emerging through the work that we're doing now. And I think in number 3, it's obviously housing. Affordable housing is not just a Campbell River crisis, but it's across the country. I want to listen to developers, and I want to listen to planners, and see where the problem is and what we can get done.
Thank you. Candidate Lanyon.
Can you repeat it, please?
Yes. If you are elected, what will be your top 3 priorities and which one would you start with?
I gotcha. So top priority for me is figuring out downtown, and generally the lawlessness that we've seen start there and then start to spread into other parts of the community. Number 2 is housing availability for all income levels. And to me, those are almost on par with each other in terms of priority. And third, I would say I'm interested in the upcoming tax increase, and I don't have access to all the information, but I'm very interested to have a look at all that and see, what we can do to make that a one-time thing or reduce the impact of what could be as much as like an 8 to 10% tax increase. The downtown thing's a real passion for me because I have an office and a property down there, and I have staff who I love, who are actually in danger some days. So for me, that's something that's the main reason why I decided to run. I don't think I would have run if there wasn't that particular issue involved as well. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Candidate Moen.
My first priority would be team building and developing a strategic plan and priorities that includes staff and creates a culture of working together. I'm about consensus, not homogeneity, and I think that there are things that we need to do, not just in looking at the next 5 years, but for the next 50 to 100 years. We need to create a vision of where we want to go, or we can't plan the actions to get there, and we certainly can't budget for it. Then we need policies and procedures to measure our progress and the impacts that we're having. Housing is the reason that I am sitting at this table. The lack of it and the lack of empathy and compassion for the people who are struggling, who are experiencing homelessness, and the lack of recognition that so many people are on the verge of living in their cars, sleeping on a neighbor's couch, or living on the streets. There are a lot of things the city can do to address that, and I would want to do many of them urgently. And I would also like to enter into discussions with the local First Nations to create and fund an Indigenous Relations Department to improve our relationships with them.
Thank you. Last week, I shared a current situation that's unfolding. Due to an impending apartment development, there is going to be an eviction of a number of people from mobile homes on this particular piece of property. One individual, she is on disability, and her sister, who is retiring, they will have nowhere to go as of January 31st. They've looked everywhere. There is no available affordable housing, and BC Housing has told them it's more than a 5-year wait for subsidized housing, even for the one who's on disability. Over the last 2 decades, countless municipalities throughout North America have gathered evidence that clearly demonstrates that preventing homelessness is way more cost-effective than addressing homelessness after the housing is lost. What would you do to encourage a more diversified and affordable housing supply, such as requiring a certain percentage of new units in any building be subsidized and affordable? That's just one possible suggestion, but what else might you consider? Candidate Lanyon.
Yeah, sure. So the most commonly mentioned one is secondary suites. I'm generally in favor of that. There's an economic upside to the city as a whole to doing that. The service fees on a house go up by about $1,000. The actual cost to the city of providing those services is less than that. So you're solving kind of 2 problems at once. One is affordable housing, the other is high taxes. So the trick is the availability of underground services, and our knowledge isn't necessarily complete in all neighborhoods about that. So this would have to be something that would be looked at on a neighborhood by neighborhood basis, and should still involve some level of community involvement in determining which neighborhoods would have any kind of open blanket rezoning to allow for it. Carriage homes, same argument. One that I haven't really thought too much about, but I know exists in Courtenay, if not here, are housing co-ops. The bylaws allow them to regulate resale prices and rental rates. So, and those could be done as partnerships with, maybe even with BC Housing. I don't know, but it's something to look into. We definitely need more lot supply, bare building lots. Right now we have an imbalance between the demand and the supply, and the price crept up to an almost intolerable level for most people. So we have to stabilize that and just make sure that we're managing the price. Yeah. So there's lots of things. I have a few more, but I don't have time.
Thank you. Candidate Moen.
Yeah, I believe housing is a human right, and I will contribute to decisions through the lens of equity, diversity, and inclusivity. We need to create a housing plan that incorporates an end to homelessness. We should accept staff recommendations for development permit restructuring. We need to update the official community plan and modernize our policies and plans to reflect the current crises we face. We can and pre-zone many more neighborhoods, particularly those identified as town centers in the OCP. Some candidates have stated that the infrastructure won't handle it, but we can actually address those problems through natural design. If we use things like water management, natural water management, rain gardens, street design, Mother Nature will actually perform a lot of those services for us. We need to lobby the provincial government to act on the UBCM recommendation that will allow municipalities to simplify how we require developers of large-scale rental units to ensure that there is a percentage that remains low income. We can create a housing service within the Strathcona Regional District. And we need to modernize our land use and development policies to promote good governance and decision-making for equitable access to attainable housing for everyone.
Candidate Blackburn.
Yeah. Well, what a tragic story for people facing, on disability and facing homelessness. Our sense of empathy and compassion has to really guide our thinking. It's a complex situation, a very complex problem that doesn't have quick, easy fixes. We have to recognize that there may be immediate things that we can change now. For example, with bylaws. Secondary suites have been mentioned many times, and what Ben has just said with co-op houses, and what we can convert that is existing now, we should be looking at closely as to how they can be modified. Past that, then we're talking about construction, we're talking about building. We will be having the OCP review next year. We need to look very closely at the development plans for infill and density. We know the list of modular homes, prefab construction homes, tiny homes. We have many entrepreneurs working on lowering construction material costs, mixed residential planning, mixed income, supportive living, subsidized housing, transitional housing. All of those will require negotiations with the provincial government. But these are relationships we need to build, and we need to build them on a very personal and professional level with staff and with the provincial leaders.
Thank you. The next question. Homelessness impacts our community's safety, health, our businesses, visitors, and the city's finite resources, and the individuals that are experiencing it. What new ideas and solutions will you bring to City Council? Candidate Moen.
I want to first say that we need to recognize and respect that we are talking about human beings. They are not issues, they are not problems, they are not all criminals. They are living with genocide and racism, transphobia, homophobia, and the failed systems of healthcare and child welfare systems. So first, we have to remember that they're human, and they deserve dignity and respect. And then we need to address the behaviors. And I don't think that we can police or security or bylaw our way out of this. We need to give people a safe place to go. We keep pushing them from place to place to place, and we are treating them with the law and with security and without respect. If they have a place to go with supports, we can utilize more health and social service and peer support to help them learn how to behave in community. And I have yet to hear anybody talk about or demonize the people that show up on payday in an $80,000 truck and deal the drugs and create the debt that turns some folks to criminality.
Thank you, Candidate Moen. Candidate Blackburn?
Well, I noticed that the question said, what new ideas are you going to bring? And I think in many ways it's the wrong question. The advancement that's being made by many of the frontline workers and their observations are offering clues as to how we can gain traction in addressing a problem that is extremely complex, as we know. We have to stop seeing homelessness as this one generic whole population. We're talking about a complexity of challenges, from poverty, from domestic abuse, from violence, trauma, residential school echoes, mental health, drug, alcohol addiction. All of these stories are individual people, and they have an individual path that has led them to the streets. Our frontline workers are working with these stories, and each individual has a way to try to encourage a sense of confidence and esteem. On our lecture here on Sunday night, we were talking about some very creative small-scale housing options, emergency shelters, let's not call it housing. Micro-employment programs have been proven. I have worked with them internationally to provide stimulus for not only income, but a sense of belonging to community. So we don't need to reinvent wheels. We need to be paying closer attention to the work we're doing.
Thank you. Candidate Lanyon.
Thank you. I do think we need to change gears. I think what we're doing is not working, and I don't know if we can do it much better. There's a lot of resources being poured into it right now. My idea is we know we need mental health and recovery from addictions and trauma, so we need a treatment facility somewhere on the North Island. That's an expensive proposition, and it would require provincial funding and First Nations partnership, and then probably a financial commitment from the city itself. In exchange, we have a place for people to go when they are ready to leave the street. Right now, it's a 6-month wait, as I hear, if you're ready for treatment. So oftentimes, people are not ready for treatment in 6 months. But then you have to ask the question, okay, you're done your treatment regime, where do you go? Right now, often you just go right back into the streets and repeat that cycle. So if we actually want to solve this, we actually do need residences that are dispersed throughout the city, not concentrated downtown or in any particular neighborhood, where social assistance can pay rent at $375 a month. There are a lot of ideas I have about doing that without forcing it on anybody, but I do not have time to talk about it. People then will ask the question, what about backfill of migration from other communities once we have openings? And I think the answer to that is you have to gradually increase law enforcement to do that. And this is not a discompassionate notion. This is solution. Thank you.
And this next question is a yes or no question. Are you in favor of a long and short-term mental health facility being built in Campbell River? Candidate Blackburn.
Yes.
Candidate Lanyon. Absolutely. Candidate Moen.
Yes.
Thank you. The number of citizens without a family doctor is growing exponentially. What would you propose for recruitment and retention of new physicians and their families to Campbell River? Candidate Moen. No, Candidate Lanyon. Losing track of who went first.
Yeah, so I do actually have a lot of clients who are physicians, and this has come up a couple times speaking with a clinic owner. One of the comments was that a new physician here, when they finish their residency, when they finish their residency, they actually, it was easier for them to purchase in a different city than Campbell River because our prices had risen so much. So in their case, that was one of the deciding factors. I think that in the summertime, we have a lot of great amenities here because we have such beautiful outdoors. But in the winter, there is not that much. And then if a young doctor is looking at raising a family, I think they're asking the question of like what activities are there going to be, and they may see more opportunity for their future family in a different center with more amenities. So that's a factor. What would I do about that? I think we do need to grow a little bit in order to have the critical mass for certain new amenities, activities, and groups. And then the third one is operating environment. I know that our hospital here is really struggling with, in part, the treatment of our vulnerable population. It is actually having a material effect on our emergency rooms and overnight stays. And I actually know a nurse who is leaving town because of that. So there are a lot of overlapping issues. The easiest ones to solve would be house prices, and thank you.
Candidate Moen.
Thank you. So I'm going off script here. First of all, I don't think we can poach. I absolutely disagree with recruiting established physicians from other communities. This is a crisis across the country. So I don't want to take what somebody else has. But what we can do is we can incentivize residents to stay once they've finished school, once they've finished their residency. And we can do this by leveraging their debt relief program with actually putting together the clinics and the staffing up front until the practice is up and running while they deal with their pay model from the province. We can incentivize and encourage and increase the number of nursing students and other kinds of health professionals into the local and nearby colleges and encourage them to stay home. And the other thing is that healthcare is a responsibility of all of us, and we need to take some of that responsibility as individuals. Naloxone is a great example where people who are trained in community are literally saving lives with naloxone while they're waiting for the overstretched emergency services, and we can spread that out.
Thank you. Candidate Blackburn.
Well, again, a challenge that has many prongs to it. A leader needs to know who to reach out to, who's got the knowledge and the expertise in a community, and to talk and learn from them. Again, this is why we need a strong staff, and we need strong relationships between council and staff. Healthcare is a complex issue. There's many levels that we need to address it on. One is definitely on the federal and provincial levels, to be a voice that is supportive of actions that we can see having results here. For example, there's a national licensing debate for physicians now that the federal government is proposing to increase physicians across the country. We need to be supportive of that. Within nursing practice, the idea of practitioners and expanding the role of nurses, taking pressure off of services that physicians are delivering now but don't necessarily need to be. We need to be modeling, encouraging those models within the education of practitioners and nurses. In terms of attracting new staff, we have to play off of our strengths. We know that the affordability issue is a challenge. We need to be dealing with that in other methods of housing. But I think quality of life factors, Campbell River is ahead of the curve for what we have to offer here for our natural environment and for our cultural environment.
Thank you. Candidate Moen, what role should council play in protecting and restoring Campbell River hospital services, such as restoring the lab to full local capabilities?
Well, first of all, I think we really need to listen to the passionate and knowledgeable people who have been intimately and doggedly involved in this for a very long time. I have not. They have Citizens for Quality Healthcare have commissioned and led citizen research, and they have a lot of very valuable information, and we can use that information to support our representative to the Regional Hospital Board to insist that Island Health be transparent about their decisions. It is our role to ensure that our residents have the necessary services. I know a woman who, in the early days of grief, after losing her partner, couldn't find the body. I can't imagine what that must feel like, and that's because we don't do autopsies here anymore. And we serve the whole North Island. So we need to work with our MLA, we need to work with Island Health, and we need to demand the services that our residents deserve.
Thank you. Candidate Blackburn.
Well, I feel like I'm just going to repeat a lot of what I say, that we have to, do organizational scans and talk to the people who are embedded within the profession to give us to give us guidance on it. When we say restore services to Campbell River, the question is what services? Each service is going to require very specific ways to be addressed. I mean, is it an equipment issue? Is it a staffing issue? Is it a professional education issue that we just don't have access to? Is it space? Do these services need to be embedded in the hospital? Are there other locations in the community for them? So it's easy to say restore services, but we have to be specific about what services that we're talking about. And to know that, we have to talk about the people that are dealing with the deficiencies every day and the challenges in the system. Again, you, as a counselor or as relationships with staff, we need to be reaching out and hearing the specific stories of what's needed, and then discussing what are the options to restore those services and how can we do it perhaps in partnerships with our existing organizations in town, all the while knowing then what we need to ask Island Health that we're asking for once we identify the priorities on the ground.
Thank you. Candidate Lanyon.
I think the way I see this is we have a shared hospital system with the Comox Valley. And so there really ought to be some sort of exchange where we now have a service that they don't possess. So I hope that's happening. I don't actually know. My understanding is that there's often a representative of council who's on the Island Health Board, and they may be able to have some influence. But beyond that, we don't control the decisions of Island Health. I believe that is a provincial matter. But we have the power as a unified voice as the top government in our particular area to lobby for things. And I would say when it's justified, council should come out and protect our services. Thank you.
Thank you. Food insecurity has become a daily challenge for many families due to the astronomical inflation. What ideas do you have to address increased small agriculture to feed our community? Candidate Blackburn.
Food insecurity. Again, much like we can talk about housing, we have to recognize that we're not close to being secure, but I think the process of heading to security is in itself offering a very healthy and a very encouraging and positive process. Number one is to review the agricultural plan. I believe it was tabled in like 2012 as part of the OCP, which we will discuss next year. The agricultural plan alongside the transportation plan need to be embedded into what the vision is. Once we identify and know the regions that are our prime kind of agricultural lands, then we can target incentives for entrepreneurs who have ideas, creative ideas for whether they're alternative niche markets in food or whether they're growing kind of market-ready food or flowers. We have to remember pollinating, and then we also have the oceans to keep in mind as well for entrepreneurship. We have some excellent young entrepreneurs in town that are working to diversify our ocean products. But basically, we need to encourage growth everywhere. People growing in their own properties has obvious health benefits. We need to look at community gardens. We need to look at pop-up gardens. We need to look at fallow spaces in the community. And we need to look at micro loans, micro enterprises in small spaces to just encourage growth.
Thank you. Candidate Lanyon.
I think we face a dilemma because if we spend our time growing food, it's time we're not spending doing something else. And I love gardening, but I know that a lot of people just don't have time to do that. So we won't move the dial much by encouraging tons of gardening. You can only really feed, well, my experience is it's a lot of work. I grow maybe 50 pounds of food a year, and that's about all I can do. So in terms of food security here, I think we will always have some significant level of dependence on larger growing areas like the prairies and the lower mainland. Vancouver Island produces, I believe it's about 10% of its own food. So we have a long way to go if we're actually going to get to security.
5%.
Is it 5 now?
It has been for a long time. It was to be 3. We've now grown it to 5. It used to be the reverse. It used to be that we grew 95% of our own food about 50 years ago, and then it started to change. And then by 2010, we were down to 3% and 3 days supply of food on the island.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, I think probably the practical solution for our area is actually some level of stockpiling. But I don't know if that's a city responsibility, you know. But I think it's an aspirational goal that we should do because gardening is very healthy. Thank you.
okay, thank you. Candidate Moen.
I agree with candidate Blackburn that we need to review and as soon as possible implement that urban agricultural plan. We need to protect the farmland and the agricultural land that does exist in the city urgently. We need to support grassroots initiatives to increase neighborhood food security. So neighborhood by neighborhood, sharing backyards, deciding what to grow so that you can trade with your neighbors. We need to encourage a local economy around growing food in a number of ways. You know, there's urban guerrilla farmers that rent space from people who don't have the time to garden, but they've got the space, and they do market gardening on a large scale. And at the city level, we can, through our economic development, incentivize alternative methods of growing on land that's not appropriate for in-ground growing, so vertical gardens, greenhouses, those kinds of things. And those can be a driver of the local economy. It employs people, it generates revenue, and it increases our food security. And at the city level, we already pay people to plant, maintain all sorts of gardens, well, turn them over to food, and to ways to increase pollinators and protect pollinators.
Thank you. Next question. Reducing car dependency and improving options for different modes of transportation has been proven to have economic, health, environmental, and livability benefits. And in light of growing climate emergency, what specific actions would you support to increase active and alternative transportation in Campbell River? Candidate Moen.
Every municipality in the country is in an infrastructure deficit. So we need an asset management plan, and I understand that one is nearing completion, slightly overdue. So we need that so that we can better plan for and implement safe and secure alternative transportation routes. We need to get more people out of their cars, but they're not going to do that if they and their family don't feel safe. So I would definitely support an accelerated and increased number of infrastructure projects to improve cycling and other forms of transportation, including scooters, motorized wheelchairs. We have to consider that everybody needs to feel safe on these paths. The Government of Canada's long-term investment plan for infrastructure is an opportunity to reshape our community, and they have added social benefit to that. So that is a lens with which we can ensure that everybody has equitable access to these forms. A lot of very intelligent people at this table have talked about all kinds of things. What I haven't heard is ways to disincentivize unnecessary vehicle use. So we need to address that through design. We need to make it slightly uncomfortable, and we need to make it harder to be in your car than to use other methods.
Thank you. Candidate Blackburn.
Yeah, reduce car use. You know, definitely a global challenge. Car design is rapidly changing. Campbell River is quite a ways away from, I think, you know, abandoning cars. It's just not going to happen. However, our biggest tool coming up is the Master Transportation Plan. That has already started to be reviewed, and in that plan, we have an opportunity to get out front of planning and look at how we build active transportation. We have very good advocates for active transportation in town. We need to be listening to them. They are mapping the community and they know the corridors and the routes that need to be adjusted. We should be encouraging cycling. We should be encouraging pedestrian and walking traffic. And it has to go hand in hand with rethinking how we're doing our public transit. And looking at how we can reroute things through the community. One thing that was very successful recently was the Greenways Loop Day, where people were encouraged to get out and do the loop and bicycle around the city. You know, when we think about how we can, if we can't make all the changes into the planning now, because those will be developments that will come down the pipe, I would really encourage us to do a Sunday car-free day where everybody is encouraged to take their bike and just make it like a festival and create action, get people familiar with it, have cycling lessons for kids and families. We need to look at a range of options.
Thank you. Candidate Lanyon.
Not my wheelhouse, I'll admit. The practical limitations we have in Campbell River, I think, are some pretty rough weather for biking part of the year. But I think for about half the year, it's definitely doable for most to commute to work by some alternative means. So alternative transportation would include, to me, bus, biking, walking at this point. So designing neighborhoods to have less of a commute to get to your necessary services is definitely something we should be doing. That's very practical. And then personally, I would love to see, like, on the flattest route possible, corridor of bike lane that goes all the way from south to north. I think it should be done now before we densify even more, because as you densify, it gets harder and harder to get access to the route. So it should be a priority on that basis, even if our bike usage right now is something like 1.74%. It's hard to measure that, because what would it be if we had a really awesome centralized bike lane? Yeah, so lots of ideas, not an expert. Somebody I have to ride my bike to work.
Okay. Thank you. As most of you are aware, competition for potential employees is absolutely fierce, and there's no sign of that slowing down. For many, salary amounts alone are no longer the single motivating factor for staying in a job. Given the number of vacancies at City Hall, you've already mentioned that tonight, and the number of professionals who have left recently, what would your approach be to creating a culture at City Hall where staff feel valued, inspired, and motivated to stay? I think it's candidate Lanyon. I think it's candidate, no, are you next? No, it's you. It's like candidate Lanyon. Sorry.
Yeah, so, boy, I'll just start by saying there was a survey done. The results were not good. I have it on my website, newcampbellriver.com, if you want to have a look. There are a lot of internal issues there. I do not know why, and it will require some digging to figure that one out. You know, overall, I'm not surprised we had turnover of 11% last year and 6% the year before with a culture like that. In terms of solutions, I value the staff. There are a lot of great people that work here. It's very difficult to be at the top of your game when you're in an environment that's not healthy for you. So I don't blame anyone. I don't judge any employee who's working in a difficult environment, you know, for anything. And I think the public needs to have some patience with staff and council as those issues are sorted out, and that could take some time. What we need to do is have a work environment that is extremely positive, where people feel rewarded and valued, and that their advancements will be based on their abilities and past achievements, as opposed to perhaps friendships or something of that nature. So I know we can fix it. Absolutely. This is one of my passions, is having a harmonious work environment where people love to come to work, and sometimes they're sick of their weekend because they want to come back on Monday.
Thank you. Candidate Moen.
Firstly, I think that council needs to respect the work and the expertise of their staff, and they need to respect staff work times, work plans. Too often what we've seen in the past is that council, without consideration for already very full work plans and activities, almost on a whim come up with a project or a report that they want written, such as changing the bylaw to relocate social service agencies, and waste hours and hours and hours of staff time and then not accept responsibility for the impacts that had. I've also heard council tell staff literally not to do their job because they didn't want to hear it. Staff are who we must rely on. Council is responsible for listening to community, for setting priorities, and then we have to trust and honor those people that we have hired to implement those plans. And we have to reward them and applaud them and thank them, because most of them, if not all of them, work very, very hard. And to address not just salary, but flexibility, we also have to look at an alternative to a 40-hour work week and look at job sharing and flex time and making sure that they have work-life balance as well.
Thank you. Candidate Blackburn.
Well, it's a great question, because I think it goes right to the heart of what leadership is. Like, what makes a good leader? What makes a good boss? I wish I could bring my staff members and former staff members forward to give testimonials about why we've been successful. When I look at how I lead, I trust their abilities. I listen to what their skill set is, and I actually learn from them because I don't pretend to know anything. We have to remember that council is responsible for governance, staff is responsible for operating. In many ways, when a councillor thinks that they're get entangled in operating, they're actually interfering with the skill set and the professionalism of the staff member. Councillors have to know when to get out of the way. Decisions will come at a later point, but in the process, they should be listening and learning. Respect, appreciation, personal relationships. Working internationally, in most countries, when you meet and talk, you spend the first hour or two or half a day talking about your family, talking about your life before you get to the point of why you're having the meeting. We forget that. We get so focused on the task at hand that we forget that we're dealing with people and their families. So personal relationships, trust and respect.
Thank you. In May of 2021, there were decisions taken by the City Council regarding the use of sports fields. And as an example, there are 900 plus slope pitch members that have been without a place to call home since then. So they've had to limit the number of teams that can play, and they're unable to run their usual charity tournaments. So what will be your approach to restoring fairness to all sports teams? Candidate Moen.
Okay, I do know that sports and recreation are integral to mental and physical well-being. And saying that, I haven't been involved in organized sports since childhood. I don't have children. I don't have grandchildren. So I don't know what the landscape is. But some of those people you're talking about, and many people are hugely invested and very knowledgeable, so I would listen to them.
Thank you. Candidate Blackburn.
Seems that my answers always tend to cycle back to listening, but I want to reach out and talk to the teams. I want to know what the challenge is. I want us as a city to do an operational scan and an inventory of what our spaces are, what our timing is, like what sports can we play when, how much daylight do we have, etc., so that we can allot a fair time and fair space to whatever the team's needs are. If we have shortfalls and deficiencies, then we need to be looking for what alternatives are. I've actually been told that the First Nations, the bands have sports fields and have facilities. Are we actually integrating well with the use of those facilities if we approach and seek help? If our situation is that we just don't have the ability to service the teams, I find it a little hard to believe that we don't have the resources to service the teams. If in fact that's true, then we need recommendations from the teams as to what we need to build and move forward. Again, this would be part of an OCP planning. It would have to be built into density planning and land zone use and resources. So again, there's no answer to that until we listen to what the concerns are.
Thank you. And candidate Lanyon.
I would say perhaps our recreation facilities have been a bit neglected. We've seen some population growth since the last time we really added anything. So it's natural now that we'll have some conflict when there's maintenance or issues at Nuns Creek Park to be done. So this is really a long-term planning issue, I think. We could have probably seen this coming a year in advance and prepped a bit more, and maybe had time to coordinate with First Nations if they were amenable to lend us their facilities. So going forward, I think we need to be a prosperous place that can afford to invest in new recreation. It has dual benefits of fun and health, and reduces the load on our medical system too. So, all in favor. I think it's easy. Cheers.
Okay. Thank you. One of the issues that has come forward in both the mayor's debate and the previous two council debates is that the city does not currently have an art policy for public art. Hasn't had one for a long time. Apparently, there is a report on a shelf along with the other reports that are all sitting on shelves. And again, this has all been coming forward through these council debates. If you are elected, how would you and what would you do about a public art policy? Candidate Blackburn.
Well, this is certainly something that I'm a part of. I wrote the public art policy with some other individuals in town, some other artists. I had it implemented into town. I got the public art committee created, and I chaired the public art committee. The challenges around public art are that I don't think it's really well understood. We don't teach art very well in schools, so the public perception of art is that it's a picture on a wall or it's a statue that stands in a square that nobody understands, and they think it's ugly and they're stuck with it. This is not what art is. Art is at the root of our culture and how we interact and how we communicate with each other. It's performance-based, live streets, the music in the square, lunchtime, evening concerts. These are all what we wrote into the public art policy to expand the notion of what public art is. Public art is also the details in a community. It's paying attention to your hydro boxes, your water boxes, your color schemes, etc. Banners, street banners, which are all through the city. All of this is considered to be public art, but it's actually an amenity and a resource for a community to raise quality of life and to make business or the factors for business conducive for people to want to be downtown. We need to revive it, and we need to revive a cultural management position within the city or a fee-for-service model. That needs to be discussed.
Thank you. Candidate Lanyon.
Yeah, compared to him, he's like the king of public art policy. So it actually sounds funny to say the word like art and policy in the same sentence, because art is so free and policy is so not free. So I can see the value in a public art policy to the extent that it makes a uniform feeling in a city. I think of somewhere like Defino, where you walk there and it just has a certain look and feel to things. So I would love to have that. I feel like sometimes Campbell River is a bit patchy in terms of how it looks, depending on what area you're in. So I love beautiful things. I do woodworking, and so I have no criticism. I always question the cost. And what are the extra delays now if we have to refer to a public art policy before we can complete a project? Delays are our biggest problem right now. So I'd say if we get the delays under control, maybe we look at a public art policy too. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Moen.
Well, I'd listen to Ken and people like him and groups like him. All the studies I've ever seen over the years indicate that for every dollar a community invests, at whatever level, into arts and culture, the community as a whole benefits from $1.30 to $3. If that was a mutual fund, a lot of people would be investing. So there is an economic and a prosperity argument to have public and other types of art all through the city. But focusing on downtown, when you bring people downtown from here or from away, the more people there are, the more safe everybody is. So that also addresses some of the social benefits that come from public art.
Thank you. And now that concludes the first part of our debate. And the second part is that each of you get to ask a question of a candidate of your choosing and a question of your choosing. Candidate Lanyon, what would be your first question and who is it for?
Sure. I have a question. Is my mic on?
It is now.
Thank you. I have a question for candidate Moen. I was looking at your campaign pamphlet. It says, create and fund an Indigenous-led reconciliation department at City Hall to improve our partnerships with local First Nations. Decisions about land use, transportation, food, and energy must include the Indigenous nations whose lands and waters our communities are built upon. So I read this, and we haven't talked very much before, and I didn't know, I was hoping you could describe just what that department looks like and what its roles and duties would be.
Well, that would be up to the Indigenous peoples who we ask to help us create it. It has to be defined by them, and that would be an act of reconciliation. That would probably be the biggest act of reconciliation, is to let them lead, because we are on and we have prospered from their lands and territories and waters. So I believe that Indigenous ways of being and knowledge and knowing need to inform how we approach all of our decision making, to at least leave at least a livable planet and future for the next generations. So I don't know exactly what that would look like, because I believe that the Indigenous peoples that are involved need to determine what that looks like.
Thank you. Do you have a follow-up question?
Yes. It's just in your campaign pamphlet, you referred to a specific department. So it just seemed very specific in terms of what that might look like. Do you? I'm not done. But that's why I asked the first question. But I guess the other question too, and you pretty much answered it, but I have a follow-up to it. What's your impression now? Would elected chief and council prefer to deal with city staff, or would they prefer to deal directly with mayor and council?
I don't know. And because it's a nation-to-nation relationship with the federal government, that I think we would have to ask them what they prefer as far as their cultural protocols demand.
Thank you. Candidate Moen, do you have a question for somebody?
I have a question for candidate Blackburn. How have you been, and how are you involved in your community as a volunteer?
What a great question. We didn't actually have a chance to chat about volunteerism tonight and how essential it is. So there's two paths to that answer. One of them is seeing volunteerism as for its economic value. It surprises people to discover that the nonprofit sector is larger than oil and gas, fishing, mining. and forestry combined. And volunteerism is embedded into that sector, which has huge economic impacts. Personally, which is the social impact of volunteerism, I volunteer at the Himalayas Kitchen downtown, the community kitchen, but I'm also the head coach for the Special Olympics basketball team. And I can only say that my engagement with the Special Olympics has changed my life. I did not know anything about it, except I'm well versed in basketball. I've played for many years, but I had no idea how profound the work is that's being done with Special Olympics, with the challenges of autism and fetal alcohol and Downs, for example. And these kids, we say the athletes, I should say, are inspiring. Volunteerism has the ability to change your life. And it has changed mine and has changed my perceptions on many things as to how communities work and how rich they actually are when you drill into them. So
Do you have a follow-up question, Candidate Moen? Nope. Candidate Blackburn, do you have a question, and who is it for?
Well, we have a few questions, but I'll start with Candidate Moen, because I know you're quite well versed in sort of housing issues and downtown challenges, and I know that you have talked before about how we need to leverage federal grants, long-term investment plans for infrastructure. So how do we do that?
Well, the very first step is to have an asset management plan so that we have a catalog of everything that we already own, and we can look at alternative uses of those facilities to address homelessness, both in the short and the long term. And once you have that plan, you can then be in a position to access grants both at the provincial and the federal level. We also need to partner and cooperate with the people doing the work. A letter of support, staff time and expertise directly offered to many of the agencies who are also struggling with capacity can make the difference to ensure that we have shovel-ready projects that qualify for those kinds of funding. Did I just lose my mic?
It sounds like it.
Try it again. Try talking.
Try talking.
There you go.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not sure if you heard the last sentence. I just said that
You have another 20 seconds, so go ahead and finish.
I think I was finished.
Oh, okay. Did you want to repeat your last statement just in case?
I just said that we can offer direct support to nonprofits and other agencies to ensure that they have shovel-ready projects that qualify for grants.
Okay, thank you. Candidate Blackburn, do you have a follow-up question?
Well, yeah, somewhat related to that, but I know from talking with you, for example, down at the kitchen, I'm curious about this idea of inclusive versus exclusive design, and design is something that can make or break how successful or how well things function in communities, whether it's street design or whether it's building design. But I'm really curious about the difference in the emphasis on inclusive versus exclusive design.
Well, both programs, projects, and the built environment can be designed to be inclusive of everyone. So if we are building something, if it is safe, secure, no hazards for the least mobile of us, then it is safe for everyone. In designing programs, if it is safe, supportive, and celebratory of people with the most challenges, then it is all of those things for people who are higher functioning or more privileged or who are further along on their healing journey. And I guess an example I would give is some of the peer programs around town, that this is where people with lived experience are given an honorarium to do work, perform community service, be involved in community, and treated as equals. Therefore, we are including them in the economic, social fabric of our community. And when we do that, the differences break down.
Thank you. Candidate Lanyon, do you have a question?
I do. Thank you. My question is for candidate Blackburn. In our earlier discussion, I got the impression about downtown, that you figured we should continue on the same path, similar but better. Is that correct?
No, well, the problem is a 90-second answer. It's the start to an answer, but it's not the whole answer, no. So, do you want me to expand? Is the question, should I expand on that?
Yes, please.
Yeah, great. That's good, because I was hoping to come around to that, complicated questions in 90 seconds, just can't get to it. What I was intending with following down the same path is that there is great work being done on the front lines, and the lessons that are being learned on the front lines are offering pathways that will make a difference, but they're slow and they're incremental. There are other things that have to go hand in hand with it. I mean, police and fire services, for example, there needs to be backup trained social services for crisis interventions. For example, the police and fire are not designed for the capacity for what they're having to deal with. We have to realize that in some cases, in severe mental health issues, there is we do need to work on ways that they have to be removed, whether it's through institutions or whether it's the court system. My compassion is that we would do it with total respect and dignity, but some people really do have issues. The other thing is removing people from triggers and from the environments. And there is some very interesting work being done with rehab farms and work training programs that work outside of the stimulants that the homeless are facing. So it has to be a multi-pronged approach, but the key is to start with what we're learning now.
Do you have a follow-up question?
Yeah, I do, yeah. I guess, like, as a downtown business owner who talks to all my friends who are, not all my friends, some of my friends are also downtown business owners, and I see a lot of suffering every day, but I don't hear any sympathy for the employees who work down there. What words of comfort would you have for them if you were on council?
To be inclusive of them in the discussion. They absolutely have to be at the table with their observations and with their lived experience. This is a lived experience challenge. It is a lived experience challenge for the homeless and for the dispossessed downtown. It is a lived experience challenge for business owners, and it's a lived experience challenge for all of the community that accesses the downtown. All have valid points and need to be listened to, but how can we know which way to move forward if we don't get together and talk about it? So we need to validate business owners' opinions and observations, because what can happen with discussion is that the observation may actually have an answer, I hate answers, it may have a solution-based reply to it because of factors that they don't know. It is very different to observe something than it is to know what's actually happening. And with the people on the front lines, they can offer insight into what may be the background story of what they're observing, which may offer a compromise between business owners and frontline workers and community members that they can work together. So it is not in any way to lessen the opinions of business owners. Absolutely not.
Candidate Moen, do you have a question?
I will ask a question of candidate Lanyon. On your Facebook page, one of your taglines is real leadership. And I would just like to know what you mean by real leadership, and also who exactly are you fighting for?
I have to make a note. One sec. Who am I fighting for? Sure. Well, the type of leadership that we have had has been quite fractured. And so what happens is, in my opinion, city staff were given ad hoc commands to do certain things or requests, and it was a little bit incoherent. And so city staff were, in some cases, it seemed to me, on their own in terms of how they were going to approach a problem. And so overall, our city dropped from, I think it was 30th place in terms of livability in 2020 to 38. So we're on a downward slide. And I think you can look around and see that we're on a downward slide. And somewhere within our whole organization is a weakness of leadership that has caused that. So I'm talking, we restore this leadership to be top-notch and make this city top 10. I think we have incredible natural advantages in terms of our resource base and the natural beauty here and our proximity to major centers. We should be doing a lot better than we are. And who am I fighting for? I think, well, it'll sound cliche, but I'm going to say it. Everybody. There's no other way to put it. Thank you.
Do you have a follow-up question, Candidate Moen?
Can you describe your idea of leadership? Your manner of being a leader?
I don't know. I suppose I could try. So I think leadership should be, it should actually be gentle most of the time. There's a time to be serious, and there's a time to just listen and be patient with people. I think people do need time to you ask them to do something, and you know they may take some time at their station to figure out how they're going to approach it. I don't like to micromanage anything. I like to set a vision and then set people free to go see if they can do it. So yeah, I think that's mine. I've had a successful career using that method, and I think there's some cross applicability between the way a city runs and the way a business runs. So I'm one of 7. My approach won't be overriding anything else, but I would really hope to be able to contribute in that sort of environment with providing that leadership that we need. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Blackburn, do you have a question?
Yes, sure. Sue one. So Ben, I talk a lot about the importance of the relationship between private business and the not-for-profit sector and how essential it is for positive community development. You're a businessman. You work in the private sector. Can you speak to how important that relationship is between private business and not-for-profit?
Absolutely, yes. So a city can run on a spectrum of either being fully not-for-profit, 100% generosity. It can also take the form of 100% profit and business focus. And you're going to have people that align somewhere on that spectrum. And the concentration of those people are going to be somewhere in the middle where they see a balance is required. If you go one way or the other, you basically have an industrial complex on the other side. You have no money and no ability to do anything. So it's the tension between these things and the overall populace's weighted desire of where they want to sit. You'll have some cities that fall more business. You'll have some that fall more not-for-profit. So we got to figure out where Campbell River sits on that spectrum. I think we've tended towards losing sight of business and its importance, to our way of life and our overall standard of living. If we don't have money, we don't get to have nice things. Thank you.
Do you have a follow-up question?
Yes. I think the not-for-profit sector suffers from a language issue. Not-for-profit organizations are businesses. They turn profits, but they're mandated to have those profits be cycled back into the community for social goods. There's a great story of Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers, the famous dance couple. And Fred Astaire was considered to be the greatest dancer in the world. But when they interviewed Ginger, she used to say, yeah, Fred's a marvelous dancer, but I do everything he does backwards and on heels. And I think it's a good analogy for the not-for-profit world, being equal dancing to business, but they're doing it with a further degree of difficulty. I'm not sure that I agree with a spectrum, that some communities are for-profit and some are not for-profit. I think they're actually more integrated than that. I think the profit or the private business is completely dependent on the social values of what not-for-profits work, the cultural values and the infrastructure that they build that's conducive for business, and the services that business provide in terms of what they do also feed into the not-for-profits, which are, we're neighbors in the end. I live beside business owners, they live beside me. So, would you want to, the question?
We're running out of time.
So the question is that I actually disagree with this spectrum analogy. Do you have anything to offer? Different than the spectrum analogy, or are you just going to stay pat? You're going to.
I want a real question.
What's your experience with the not-for-profit sector?
Yeah, so I have about 15 years working on different boards: Campbell River Marine Rescue Society, Campbell River Wrestling Association, and several others that are escaping me at this moment. Mm-hmm. I was on the BIA for I think about 7 years as treasurer. So in trying to juggle my working career and family, I managed to find time to volunteer on quite a few things. So I'm not unsympathetic to it in any way. I have a viewpoint, which is that cities are a tension between objectives, and everyone has a different objective. So the whole role of governance is to balance the public interest. Thank you.
Okay. Candidate Lanyon, do you have a question for someone?
Yeah. So Sue, you have a strong environmental focus. How do you balance the interests of the public as it pertains to their gainful employment versus the environment?
Okay, so first I'm going to start from the premise that gainful employment means nothing if we don't have a planet to live on. But so we have to consider climate breakdown in all of our decisions. That will not stop us from doing business. It will not stop people from working. We just have to look at working at different things and in different ways. So how we build, what we build, how we move about the city, how we move outside and into the city, those are the things that we have to look at. There are all sorts of innovators and entrepreneurs here, as candidate Blackburn mentioned, coming up with new ways of building, less energy intensive. We can relocalize our economy to create both prosperity and jobs by looking at energy systems, food systems, waste systems. We can encourage social enterprise that uses waste to create jobs and goods that we need. So you can be gainfully employed and serve the environment.
Do you have a follow-up question?
Yeah, I would like to get your general thoughts on forestry and aquaculture, please.
Well, I think most people that know me know that I disagree that aquaculture is good for the planet or good for the fish. I believe that they are inhumane fish feed lots, and I don't agree with them on land or in the ocean. There is a transition plan, and because I don't eat fish at all, I don't know, I don't even agree with that, but we can take them out of the ocean, we can get out of the way of wild salmon, and they are doing it in other countries, and I don't see a valid reason not to do it here. When we talk about forestry, a working forest, we should be working for the forest so that it can work for us, and there are more opportunities in forestry, depending on how you define that, to make sure that it is working for more than just the people that are cutting down the logs. We can manage them. We have tree farms. We don't need old growth. And there are lots of other values in the forest, and we can insist that the wood and the wood products stay here.
Thank you. Candidate Moen, do you have a question? This will be the last round of questions, and then we'll go to our extras. So do you have a final question for someone?
I do not. I had questions for the absent candidates.
Candidate Blackburn, do you have a final question?
Yes, I do. Actually, I'd like to ask it to both of the candidates because I think it's just interesting how creative we can get. I mean, Sue, you have a lot of experience downtown with the markets and with events. I think we have some very strong festivals, our live streets, our markets. As I mentioned before, Music in the Square, our Hague Brown Festival, our Art and Earth Festival, Logger Sports. Where do you see opportunities to kind of grow new either festivals or new events in Campbell River?
Candidate Lanyon, could you answer first?
Passing it to Sue.
Oh, did you ask that of Sue?
Well, I asked Sue first, but I'd like to hear both, just because.
Okay, so candidate Moen?
Everything that's good about Campbell River and about humanity, that can create a festival. There are a lot of really passionate and invested people in a number of different areas. And so I would seek those people out for their ideas. There's so many great ideas out there, but I do think that they need to come from grassroots to make them sustainable with city support. Of course, I'm blanking on some of them, but I would love to see a neighborhood potluck or dinner where all of Shoppers Row is tables and chairs, community coming together to celebrate local food, as an example.
Yeah, I think this is very important in terms of overall livability. I think we need some more nighttime events of some kind. And in general, I am shocked. Like, we lose so much money from our economy each year because people travel elsewhere for events. But we don't have that many here that really attract a giant crowd, other than the two that I can think of, which would be like the Logger Sports and Salmon Festival. And I guess maybe also the classic car show. A lot of the stuff's more locally focused. We don't have an attractant here. So something like that. It could also mean that at some point, maybe after a recession, we have a shovel-ready project for like some kind of stadium or large facility that can seat a large amount of people, and then we can have more events there. So it's a big area. It's not my area of expertise. Absolutely something that you'd open up to the public for ideas. Thank you. The what?
The Tide Mark Theater, right on here.
Outside. Yeah.
Do you have a follow-up question?
Well, the follow-up question was that I know, working with past tourism bodies and operators, that the idea of moving into shoulder seasons outside the main summer event is seen as a growth area, and I was just curious if either of the candidates had some insight as to what that would look like, shoulder season events in Campbell River, which is sorely lacking right now.
I agree that it's sorely lacking, and I tend to put them on and manage them, not so much come up with the ideas. But I'd encourage the good ones out there and then apply my skills and networking abilities to help make it happen.
Go ahead, candidate Lanyon.
Can I get the question? Sorry, I kind of missed the punchline.
Can you repeat the question?
Do you have any ideas for events and festivals that Campbell River could foster in our shoulder seasons?
By shoulder, you mean spring and fall?
Yeah, or winter. But generally, shoulder does refer to spring and fall. But we do have a season in the middle. Let's say our neck season.
Anything other than summer.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know, honestly. Every year in October, I hosted a Viking festival at my house. But
Would you like to expand that to the entire city?
I can't. But I
We
think
could
I
have
think
it
more,
here at the Tidemark Theater.
Yeah, I love to encourage this. I don't know what the city's involvement in that would be. We absolutely have a limited money and top priorities to deal with. So I think it's fun to think about, and I don't know. I don't think I can answer that in a way that will satisfy candidate Blackburn.
Okay, well, I've made note of the Viking Festival, so we'll be speaking after this. Okay. Did you have any final questions of anybody? No. Okay. Then you can start with the extras. So if you could please share with us your final statement. Candidate Lanyon.
Sure, I just have to prompt myself 1 second.
That's okay.
Yeah. Okay, so we have talked about some very important things tonight, and I don't mean to diminish those at all, but stepping back, this election is very serious to a lot of people. I think this feels to a lot of people like a big choice in terms of the direction that the city is going to go. I've even had it said to me that this actually feels more like a referendum than it does a regular election. I think on the one side, we have a camp that is dying for order to be restored throughout the city. And within that same camp, both sides of this camp, I will say, show a strong opinion about what we can do about the housing. We all agree on that. But I think the difference is what we're going to do about downtown and lawlessness in general. I think that will be the deciding factor in a lot of people's campaigns. So what we need, strong leadership, a clear vision, and clearly presented values that you know you can count on when you vote. So I would say research all the candidates. I hope I've presented myself clearly. If you need any more information, feel free to contact me directly. Thank you very much.
Candidate Moen, your final statement, please.
Thank you, everyone, for coming, and for those that are tuning in live and will watch later. Despite how it may have appeared, I'm not a one-trick pony. I have spent so many years advocating on behalf of dispossessed peoples that I can sometimes come across as not being able to see the other side and the impacts that people experiencing homelessness can have on people's perception of safety, and then the resultant poor behavior or even criminal behavior that has a lot of complex roots. And my focus has always been to explain that and to seek compassion before we start applying solutions. We need to define what the actual problem is. And I think that is a difference from some of the things that I have been hearing. I don't believe we will police our way out of this. I think that as caring and compassionate community members, we can seek to understand. We can, as candidate Blackburn said, apply and continue to learn some of those great solutions. And we have alternatives to the police and other ways of addressing problem behavior and lessening the impacts, very real impacts on people and business. Vote Sumo on October 15th.
And candidate Blackburn, your final statement, please.
I don't think that there's any doubt that we would be in agreement. We have some serious challenges, whether it's in housing, whether it's in homelessness, whether it's safety, whether it's environmental, which we didn't talk very much about tonight, but we do face some serious challenges as a community, and we share many of these challenges with communities across the country. But I want to say this. I am not afraid. And the reason I'm not afraid is because of who I stand shoulder to shoulder with in this community. As I said at the beginning, I have an industrial background and I've spent a lot of years not-for-profit. I work with industries in town, I work with small businesses, I work with tourism operators, I work with not-for-profit organizations across the spectrum of social challenges, educational, environmental, tourism, etc. Campbell River is amazing for the people who live here. I have worked around the world and I have never seen such a high caliber of dedicated, amazing people. So I stand shoulder to shoulder with these people, and because of that, I am not afraid. We can take on any challenge that's coming up if we work together. My name's Ken Blackburn, and I'm asking for your vote on October 15th to make a change in Campbell River. Thank you.
Thank you, candidates, for the courage that you have shown in letting your name stand for public office and for taking such a personal approach to being involved in our democracy. Thank you to everyone who came tonight, who's watching online, and who will watch the recording afterward. Please vote. It is the single most important thing you can do when you are a member of a free society that has free elections. Vote. Thank you to the Tidemark Theatre team and everybody at the Campbell River Mere. Good night.